All right, guys, thanks for joining us today to announce our new head coach, Coach Greg Cooper. We're really excited to have him. We'll start with statements by Kimball, Brandon, and Coach, and then move to questions here in the room. And then we have some people joining us over Zoom as well. So after everyone in here has wrapped up their questions, we'll answer a few questions over the computer. So Kimball, anyway.
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here, taking time out of your busy schedules, making it down. It's good to see some of our staff members and some of our players even here supporting this announcement. This is a day that's been long in the making, especially given where we were at this season, where we ended up record wise, but importantly with the changes that we had, that transpired halfway through this year. So for us, this has been a very methodical and well thought out process. Brandon and the rest of our staff have done a very good job at identifying dozens of potential candidates and being able to narrow it down to a handful of folks that we felt could do the job. But in the end, there was one candidate that we knew we had to get on board, and that would be the perfect match for where the Utah Warriors not only have been, but more importantly, where we want to go. And that's to build this epicenter of rugby for North America, and nothing short of that. So it was pretty, in my first conversation with Greg, it was pretty instantaneous that I knew that this was our guy. Well thought out conversation, had done his research and knew a lot more about Utah than I think I even knew about some of the things that we have going on here. Even in some cases more about the players than I was somewhat familiar with. So it was really a good conversation. So I think for me, in my capacity of having been with this team now for, from its inception, being a part of the early days of the MLR, as the Utah Warriors being a founding franchise within the MLR, to have a coach of Greg's caliber to join the Warriors and to join the MLR is a watershed day for this organization and for this league. And I think that'll come out in the conversation and the questions that'll get answered here. But it's really no short thing to say that we now have the most experienced coach in the MLR in Greg Cooper. So we're very excited to have him here. We're grateful to have him as part of this organization. Cooper, Greg Cooper, but he goes by Coops. So we're still kind of working that out.
No, you're doing pretty well, man.
So.
Yeah, I mean, as Kimball mentioned, it was an exhaustive process that we went through the coach interview. I believe Greg and I first spoke. Greg and I first spoke in week, I think it was week 8. We got in contact throughout that. What really impressed me, and made me confident that he'd be the right person for the job was his worldly experience. He comes from 3 of the most toughest competitions in the world as it relates to rugby. His experience, if you were to put it in an American landscape, sporting landscape, is equivalent to somebody like a Jimmy Johnson, a Pete Carroll, Bruce Arians, or even a Jim Harbaugh. So to bring somebody with that caliber and that wealth of diverse experience for a team that's also very diverse is a huge asset for us. Greg's ability to impact developmental programs with any of the organization has been, especially with the work that he did in Mitsubishi, is really important to us. As Kimball mentioned, we are working to be the epicenter of North American rugby. And a part of that is growing players and coaches holistically through our pathway. We aren't an organization that wants to be dependent on importing talent. We want to be able to say that we're never rebuilding. We're always going to be reloading. And it starts by having a unified pathway with a head coach that works his way down through the U18s, the selects, on to the MLR, to make sure everybody's learning the same thing, developing in the way that they should. So they can both progress as a player and a coach. So I'm really excited to welcome him to Warrior Nation. It should be a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see the fireworks that him and the staff create for the next 4 years.
Kimball and Brandon, thanks for those kind words. It's tremendous. Just for me, it is a real honor to be here. It's I think it's been mentioned that there was a discussion's been going on for a while, but And Kimball, you mentioned there that you sort of knew early on. I knew early on as well. This organisation has had, while the MLR is only a young competition, this organisation here to me has got some very, very strong foundations. And that was really evident when I was discussing in those early stages. So the foundations are there and the success has been there. And for me, I'm just really excited about the opportunity to build on that success. I think really, really important for me too is respect. And I think as a person, as a coach, I've got a lot of work to do. Yes, I have coached in a lot of areas, but that doesn't mean to say that I come here and I've got the right to be respected from the start. I've got to earn that right. So there's a lot of work in front of us. I'm really excited about that work. I've spoken to some players. Spoke to Lance the other day, and it's really nice to be able to actually start connecting with players. So for me, as I said, a lot of work to be done. And I'll say it right now. You can talk about championships, and you can talk. That is the goal of every team. There's no question about that. But the important thing for me is it's the playoffs. Every year you should expect to be in the playoffs. So how you get there it's a bit of a long journey, and that is the expectation. That's the expectation that I'll put on myself, and that's obviously the expectation I'll put on the organisation and the players, obviously in particular. So looking forward to working with the coaching group, all the staff, and our goal, as I said, will be to make those playoffs. So once you get to the playoffs, it's anyone's game. Sometimes it works your way, sometimes it doesn't. But clearly, we'll be chasing those championships. But our focus will be getting to the main event first of all, and that's every year. It's not just I think the thing about the Warriors is it is about consistent success. So we don't want to be up and down. We want to be consistent. There's good years and there's not so good years, but every year will be an expectation. We're going to be there. We're going to be in the fight, and I think that's really important. The other exciting thing, obviously, is the Rugby World Cup is coming to America in 2031 for the men's and 2033 for the women's, and I think that adds a lot of stability to the MLR, and that's also part of after coaching in New Zealand, coaching in France, coaching in Japan. When I saw that announcement, it really excited me because I think there's only one way forward now. Obviously, there was a little bit of a hiccup on the weekend, but American rugby will continue to grow, and I think that announcement is really, really important. So, for me, that just added another bit of the excitement because I do believe that American rugby is going to grow. And Brandon did mention about the growth here. To me, that's really important. You don't just bring in hired help or players come in and out. We've got to build the strength and the depth here. And there is a history of rugby here. So there's a history of an opportunity to grow that. And obviously that's my responsibility now, along with other coaches, along with other staff. So looking forward to building that depth, that growth. So again, I'll just use that word again, that sustainable success. We just continue to be successful. But thank you and for coming along. I'm sure you have some questions. I'm very, very excited. And as I said, a lot of work to be done. I actually thought the other day, I wish this competition would start, but I don't really want it to start because I know there's a lot of work to be done. So once we've done all that hard work, I'm sure we'll be ready to face the fight.
So I'll open it up to questions from the media. If you're joining us over Zoom, just use that raise hand feature and we'll get to you guys soon. But for those of you here in person, if you want to just raise your hand, we'll call on you and ask a question for any of these three guys up here. So, Jaron.
Coach, first off, welcome to Utah.
Thank you.
Great to have you. You mentioned early you knew it was a good fit as well.
Yeah.
What did you, hear or know that made it a good fit for you?
Well, I think the important thing for me is, I think when you're in a conversation with someone over the phone and there's things that are said that clearly make it obvious. Now, one of the things I did do, and I'm sure there's representatives of those in the marketing and the web. I went to the website for a start. I went straight to the website and I looked. I thought that is incredibly professional, and it told me a story. And then started to have conversations with Kimball, with Brandon. And they were talking about the goals and wanted to make it the epicenter of rugby in North America. And that's an easy thing to say. It's really easy to say. But when you dig behind the scenes, and as I said, starting with simple things, the website, looking at the team and how they had performed, because they have performed. And then even looking at the performances, and I've seen all the performances, but I looked at particularly at the Austin game. I looked at the Atlanta game. I looked at the LA game. Unfortunately, some yellow cards didn't help there, but there were some really strong performances there. And I'm looking at that, and then I'm looking at where they had been. I thought, no, there's something going on here. I said, I had a look, I analysed the performance, and I've spoken with the coaching staff, and I honestly believe that this is a team that is going places. So, yeah, there were some telltale signs there.
But then, in terms of everything else, what made the timing right for you for this kind of a challenge?
If you have a look at, I have coached a lot professionally. The timing is absolutely right. I've just left a team. I just left a team that we had a very, very successful year. And one of the important things for me is to leave a place in a better state than when you started. This team, I'm really proud of it. I know that I can jump on a plane and head back to Tokyo. I can sit amongst the crowd. I can sit amongst the supporters, and I know I did my job. So that really was part of the timing. The other part of the timing, as I mentioned, was where I think the rugby is going in the USA, and I think we're only 5 years into this competition, so I think it's going to continue to grow and grow and grow. So for me, it is so important that, well, for me, it was an obvious fit. Leaving a place in a good state, going to another place where there's growth to be had, not just locally but also nationally.
How quickly do you feel like you have to get your staff together at this point?
Get myself together.
How quickly do you feel like you need to get the staff together, the assistant coaches and so on?
We're talking at the moment. I've got a meeting tomorrow with Sean. We have spoken. We had a meeting with Robbie yesterday as well. So yeah, no, we're talking. I've actually got another meeting next week with Robbie. So yeah, no, we've got a lot of work to do. There's scheduling to be done. I think the first important thing is I'm not coming here to say this is what we do. I'm coming here to find out what are we doing, and then because what we're doing here is some really good stuff. But there's going to be some changes because there's always change, and I think there'll be an expectation there'll be change, but it might just be subtle change, or it might be reinforcing what is good. So. As I said, I'm not coming here to say we're doing this, we're doing that. I'm coming here to understand and then modify if need be, change if need be, or just reinforce.
What do you feel like is already good?
I feel there's one really, really important. There's an incredible community spirit here. And I think, I'm talking to a rugby background here. The great successful rugby teams have built a lot on community. And when I say community, that is the link between the team and the community. And I think that's really important. I think the really good thing is the off the field organisation. I think it's very strong. I think there's a good connect between the off the field organisation and the rugby team itself. So I also believe in the players. I've actually had a really strong look at the players, and I think there's some real talented players there. And with every team, there will be change. So that happens. But I think the core of the players here are very, very good players. And I think importantly, the homework that I'm doing and the feedback that I'm getting, they're good people. I think it's important to have, it's the people before the player. The player is the second part of the equation, but get the people right first.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
There's a Major League Soccer team that lives on these premises as well. But what do you think of the facilities and the community, and how is that going to aid in the process of you hoping to accomplish?
Well, I think the facilities are fantastic. They really are. I mean, this facility here I think it's outstanding. I think having another professional organisation nearby is important. Obviously been involved in rugby. I've visited Australian rules. I've visited soccer in the UK. I've visited rugby league in Australia. So I'm really into understanding other organisations as well, because you can learn off the other organisations. So to me, I think it's exciting that there's another professional organisation at our doorstep, because I think crossing over in sports and getting understanding is really important. Hopefully we drive each other.
Brandon, obviously, I don't know exactly what goes into these sort of processes, but I imagine you have some sort of wish list that you kind of try to tick off as time goes on. What were the characteristics that Greg had that kind of made you say this is really the guy we want?
Yeah, I think it started a lot with what we wanted to define, and probably the primary, most important attribute that we wanted was someone that was a successful educator. The second one after that was somebody that had a diverse background, not just in rugby, but like as far as what they've done. You know, Greg is a successful rugby coach, but he's also been a successful businessman. You know, Greg has a proven track record of being an educator and developing them around them, like the work that he did in Japan and with the national team, and so on and so forth, has been instrumental. And then there was probably a list of about 16 attributes that, if I remember correctly, he marked off 14 of them. So, yeah, it was quite an exhaustive search, and we got the right guy with it.
What were the two he didn't know?
I'm just thinking that. I'll be asking that question later.
6'7".
Yeah, I want to taller or better looking than me. So,
So you played at the end of your playing career and at the start of your coaching career, you kind of came across that transition from amateur to professional.
Yeah.
And now you see the growth of the league here. You kind of watched the benefits of that in Japan. How do you see the growth of American rugby compared to initially in New Zealand and then in Japan, and of course, seeing the epitome of it across Europe?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. And I think I say this, I'm lucky that I was in the non-professional era first. And then I sort of dabbled in the professional era as a player, and then obviously got into the professional era as a coach. So I've seen both sides, and obviously I think one of the great things about the old days, I don't want to go back too much to the old days, but the great thing about the old days, it was about community, it was about camaraderie, and it was about, you know, looking after your mates and fighting for your mates. And I think that's really, really important when it comes to the actual practical rugby side of things. You know, we go through good days and we go through bad days, but we never ever fracture in those days. So that's really important. From a professional point of view, yeah, this is early. This is 5 years entering the 6th year of MLR. So there are going to be things that I would have seen through the 20 years as a professional coach that hopefully I can help with. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here that I don't want to come here as an expert. I'm not an expert, you know, and I think this is I come here with experience. I've got to learn first. I've got to understand, and I think that's crucial. I've got expertise in certain areas. I'm just going to make sure my expertise fits, and that's really important to me. So I will see things. I think that maybe we can fast track professionally because I've seen it before, but I first of all have to understand the ground here at the moment.
Any other questions in the room?
It's kind of a little bit of a non-rugby question, if you will, because you mentioned that as you kind of went into these meetings and we're talking to Kimball, talking to Brandon, you went to the website, you looked at the organization, you kind of looked around sort of the landscape of the Warriors. Did you learn anything about Utah as well, and kind of just the environment and the overall community?
Yeah, I did. I tend to do that. It's something that interests me a lot. I love history. I understand about how Utah, or how the history of the religious side of Utah was important for me to understand. I understand there's been hardship, and I think that's one of the things. You know, I come from the bottom of the South Island in New Zealand, and there's a lot of history of hard work to get to where you need to get to. So I did obviously the obvious things like the landscape, the geography, but I dug as deep as I could understand because it is important to me. Whether it's more about making sure that I respect and understand local. And as I said, I'm no expert on it, but I've dug as deep as I can to have had an understanding. You know, as I said, I've lived in France, I've lived in Japan, I've got a Croatian mother, so you know, I do tend to try and understand a little bit.
Of course, since you've traveled quite a bit through your various teams, going with pacing and everything, obviously there's any difference from New Zealand pace, Japan's pace. Is there anything interesting that you saw with the way that Americans play rugby that you feel is better or something that you want to attack going forward?
Want to use from the other?
Yeah, from like the other leagues, say like from New Zealand compared to.
No, I think the important thing is every experience is different. Even my year coming up, this year, the next year will be different. There's always subtleties. So no, I think again, it's about gathering the information, understanding what did I learn in New Zealand that could be beneficial here? What did I learn in France? What did I learn in Japan? I think the great thing about all of that is, while it's English speaking, it's culturally different, like New Zealand and Australians. So we're friends, but there's differences, there's subtleties there. So I will answer your question. No, I won't grab, hey, there's something out of France. I might grab something out of France that might be quite useful here, but I need to understand first. And I'm sure I will grab little bits and pieces. And I think that's the exciting thing for me. And you know what it's like. You only know what you know, and that comes from experience. And I will have failures here. I will have that, but I'll learn. Hopefully, I'll learn from it. So, and those over the years, you hopefully don't make those mistakes again. And that's the beauty about what I've been able to do.
Yeah, Joe and then Jared.
Just really quickly. Obviously, we all know that you've been involved with the league from the start, one of the family members and things like that. How important do you think coaches of Greg's caliber are important to the growth of the league, not only just the teams, but the league as a whole now moving forward as we look to, we use 2031 as the benchmark that kind of we are looking at.
Yeah, I mean, the phrase rising tide kind of comes to mind, right? We need to continue to develop and increase the caliber of rugby acumen, but more importantly, there's still a maturation that the MLR in general is going through in terms of its professionalism. And that's part of the process. That's something that we knew that would take place over time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You don't just, you guys saw it in New Zealand. We saw it in all the professional leagues in Europe. There's a 5 to 10 year, professionalization curve that goes into that process. And I would even say that some of those leagues are still maturing and growing from a facilities and other perspectives. So, we've got to just continue to push the envelope and the boundaries, but at the same time, you want to make sure that you balance that with bringing the other boats up with you along the way. And that means really making sure that the caliber of leadership that you bring into a key role like this needs to also be very well connected and well thought out with regards to how you're going to connect it to the rest of the community. Because you'll see that the teams that have been most successful in international rugby, Leinster, Toulouse, Leicester, Harlequins, Saracens, they have these pathways. They have those connections to the community that make it sustainable year over year over year. To use Brandon's phrase, it's not rebuilding, it's reloading. And so a big part of the emphasis and the role here for what Coops is going to be doing is going to be helping get out in the community and developing those relationships with the collegiate, the high school, the amazing community that we have here in Utah that is irreplicable anywhere else in the country.
For Sparksy and then for Coops as well. You made the comment, Coach, recently about how with the recent struggles in New Zealand, how they could benefit from a partnership with some of these Japanese clubs and the connections there, obviously going back with John Kerwin and the national team there. Yeah. Brandon, is this something you could see clubs here forming a more official partnership with some of those professional leagues to benefit from their experience and then have not only that player pool, if you will, but that experience and that teaching and learning experience going back and forth? Is that something that we could see maybe happen here in America where we have the resources to be able to facilitate that now for growth?
Yeah, I think partnerships out there exist inside the rugby ecosystem. If I'm honest with you, I think there's a lot that we as a rugby community can do to learn from the sports that are already existing and more established than us. I think if you look at what USA Hockey, USA Soccer have done with their pathways, in USA Soccer especially, like USA Soccer to be able to look at something, realize something wasn't working and then blow it up and start over again. I think that's valuable lessons that we should take on. I think it was Eleanor Roosevelt that said that, learn from other people's experience because you're not going to live long enough to get it all yourself. And I think yeah, there is partnerships out there that exist, and I think that there's partners, that there's teams and organizations around the world that are eager to work with us. But I also think it starts by us looking around at all the other sports that are 50, 60, 70 years ahead of us. So.
All right, we'll move to questions over Zoom.
All right, we have a couple of questions on Zoom. Let's start with James Deely. Go ahead, James.
Hi guys, thanks for including me. Just a quick question, probably for all three of you. In little under a month, there is something that's almost uniquely North American in the MLR Collegiate Draft, and I'm wondering if you guys will be approaching that draft with any kind of particular vision, be that in the short term or the long term.
Grab that,
Yeah, I
Brandon.
guess that one. Yeah, with our draft strategy, if I'm honest with you, we learned a lot from the first draft, a lot of what not to do. We kind of recalibrate that in a year or two, and we saw an awesome crop of athletes come through there with Emerson Pryor, with Connor Burns and Joey Baki. I firmly believe that we have the future of North American scrummaging in our pathway right now with Elijah Hayes and Emerson Pryor. We're going to look to build on that going into this draft. We're not the type of organization that are going to draft these kids and expect them to perform right away. We're going to give them time to develop, give them the tools to develop. And there's a few key areas positionally that we need to start strengthening for the future. And that's going to be our target heading into the draft in about a month's time.
Thank you.
All right, next up we have Rob Hammerschmidt.
Thank you. I'm wondering, Greg, you did a lot of assessing, and obviously you looked at some games from this last season, and kind of identified some of those matches as matches that you look for progress and growth, and looked at some other ones and perhaps said, we need to use those as learning experiences. I'm interested in finding out, are there some positions that you've identified right away that perhaps you need to bring in talent, or you need to develop talent, or some areas that you saw that need improvement and that you're going to be looking to move players into those positions to have a more successful season in 2023, excuse me.
Yeah, I think the important thing there is there's always going to be growth, and so what the core of what we've got now, I'm very, very confident in. We will be in a process, and we are in a process of just looking at the roster. So it's ongoing discussions, and so working very closely with Brandon and the other coaches on that. I think a lot of the success, to me, or the future success, will be based on, one is, I think, primarily is going to be growth of what we have, and growth of obviously the development of the younger ones as well. But some of the things for me is about simplicity, keeping things simple, and looking at the basis of our conditioning, making sure our conditioning is strong. I mean, unless you've got the strong conditioning behind you, you really don't have a lot going. So one is just want to make sure that our conditioning is where it needs to be. Secondly is developing. There's a lot of games that were relatively close as well. So there's possibly a bit of a mindset understanding there. And I think if we keep things simple, the mind operates more efficiently. So if we're in a great condition, if we are simple, we understand what we're doing. In terms of the growth that you're talking about and development, I think those close losses become close wins. Those close wins become confidence. That confidence becomes momentum. And when you've got momentum, it's a really hard thing to break. And that goes both ways. That goes momentum downwards and momentum upwards. So, I'm confident we get it right. We build that momentum. We'll be unstoppable if we get on that rise.
All right. Then we have Matt McCarthy.
Hey everybody, Coach, welcome to the good old USA. It's a big place. It's a big country. Before I get into my first question, I got a quick question for you. Do you call JK sir? You call John Kerwin, sir.
John Kerwin.
Yeah. You'll remember.
John Kerwin.
Yeah.
Do you call him Sir John Kerwin?
I actually caught up with JK the other day, and I didn't realize he was there. I was at a restaurant and I got put in a headlock by JK. So I did call him Sir after that. I did call him Sir. He walked up from behind me, but no, I used to actually live with JK when I was playing for Auckland, and JK and I are very, very, very good friends.
All right, so now for the serious question. Your resume has taken you all over the globe, Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere. What would you say a coach Greg Cooper's stamp is on a team? What kind of style of play, if you have one?
Good question. I think the style of play you've got to be very careful with bringing a style of play based on the profile of the team. Now, I've had a good look at this team here, and I think this team can play a multi-style game. I think clearly, and Brandon alluded to it in terms of this, I think it's strong up front. I think it's got some real firepower out wide, and it's got, obviously some really strong carry in the midfield as well. So I've got my thoughts on how the game should be played, and I'm obviously discussing that with the other coaches. I'm a believer in you don't come with a absolute style. You've got to understand the profile of the team, because if I came here and said, let's play a wide, expansive game, and that's not appropriate, or certainly I'm from New Zealand, we like to use the ball, but there's ways of using the ball, and I know that there's a very strong forward pack. There's a hungry forward pack that loves the physical side of it, and I'll certainly be encouraging the physicality in our game, because we get physical in our game. We carry the ball, we carry strong, we use the ball, and we've got weapons that can use the ball. So we've got to engage the opposition, and we've got to keep going at that opposition. And it also goes without the ball. So the mentality will be attack with or without the ball. That's my philosophy. But there's ways of doing that. But unless we bring physicality to the game, unless we put the opposition on notice that we are going to be physical, we'll lose the battle. So we've got to battle first and take the rewards later. So that'll be basically how we'll be looking at playing the game. But there's going to be formulas around that.
Okay. One last question from Rob.
Many teams kind of have a style a roster that's a little bit reflective of their staff and coaching. Obviously, Houston with South African influence because of Heineke Meyer. In New York, Marty Veal has had a heavy New Zealand influence. Obviously, Kimball and Brandon are from the United States, but Greg, you're from New Zealand. Can we expect to see more heavily, New Zealand influence come in as you begin to look to bring in players to play in Utah for 2023?
As I said, from my point of view, I'm extremely satisfied with the roster, and again, Brandon coaching group. We're looking at what the future looks like. So that's an ongoing process. So no, again, for me, just to reemphasize, to me, it's about looking what we have and utilizing the type of players we have to play the type of game we need to play. Yes, I know Heineke well, and I know what looked at Houston and how they play, and it does resemble the style that Heineke's had in the past. I don't believe I have one style. I think you need to adapt to the surroundings. And as I said, we've got some forwards here that I think have already earned the respect of the opposition. I think they'll be even more respectful of the style that we'll be playing. And as I said, we've got some, I'll call them the fancy backs, because that's what they're known as. And they will hopefully get the opportunity to show what they can do. So they'll be attacking rugby, no question about that. And the players we have here can certainly do that.